Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this episode of Turbocharge Tomorrow. Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I see some folks joining and jumping in. We're going to give everyone just about another 10 or 15 seconds, and we've got a lot of ground to cover today, Ariel and Dylan. So we're going to dive right in. How are you both doing today?
Wonderful.
Excellent.
Thank you for having us.
Amazing. Awesome. All right, people are coming in. As people start joining, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off just because as we prepped, I'm really excited for what we're talking about today. Last Thursday, I opened up TechCrunch like I often do, and Mark Benioff is there. And the article says, Mark Benioff warns that AI, while useful, is overhyped. And he's blaming Microsoft. Gentlemen, I don't know if you had a chance to check out Dreamforce. I was not there in person, but I listened to it and I watched it, and it was 3 days of nonstop AI. So here's my question that we're going to cover today. If Mark Benioff, who arguably has one of the largest microphones in all of tech, spends 3 days nonstop talking about AI, and then turns around and says, yeah, I mean, it's okay, but it's really not as great. Like, what are we to make of this? Should I get on the train, off the train? I couldn't be more excited today to welcome Ariel, you and Dylan over at Paragon for this episode of Turbocharge Tomorrow, as we dissect fact from fiction, as we separate signal from noise, and we talk about the AI hype today. How does that feel?
Feels good. And,
good.
Good news, bad news. I think Benioff's right. It's overhyped. Technology goes in cycles. I've seen quite a lot of them over my career. Went from ERP to CRM to supply chain to e-commerce to, chatbot revolution phase one. Now we're, somewhere between AI hype cycle 2, throw in some blockchain cycles in there. Those are their own thing, right? Like not all plants are orchids, but all orchids are their own thing. Every hype cycle has its pluses. It creates an intense public attention around something and excitement. It's like the whole world is participating in this giant hackathon. And that's the positive side. The negative side, it's really a wake-up call because, if you're someone with a SaaS platform that's decades old, like Benioff, I mean, he's been making strategic acquisitions to keep it relevant. Like, for example, the acquisition of Tableau on the business intelligence side was incredible. But, you're a little bit concerned, and you're also, if you're in that big software space, you're trying to be the one-stop solution for everything that everybody will need.
Yep.
So that's a challenging position, but the best of times and the most challenging of times at the same time.
I love it. Amazing. So that's the opening salvo and what we're going to talk about today. Before we dive deeper, I want to make sure our audience here at Turbocharge Tomorrow gets to know both of you. So Ariel, you've got the mic. Would you mind doing an introduction for us?
Sure. I'm Ariel Jalali. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Paragon. Been in the technology space for close to 25 years now. Started off actually in private equity. I managed data for a fund that built and flipped information-based businesses, business-to-business information directories and newsletters and things like that. Then I went into management consulting for a number of years, focused on data warehousing, big data, found my way through technical project management, became a CTO, then had a phase as a serial entrepreneur, and most recently came out as a fractional chief technology officer, joined forces with Dylan, figured that we would start This is Paragon about 5 years ago, and we are happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Welcome. Dylan?
And I'm Dylan Steinman. I'm our COO. I came up through the media and entertainment space, and then for the better part of the last decade and a half have been in technology advisory.
Fantastic. All right, gentlemen, let's dive in. So whether we like it or not, Ariel, I like what you mentioned. We're on the hype cycle right now, and the audience listening today is highly technical, but everywhere you turn, whether it's on your team, the technical team, or from the business side, you may be getting asked, what's our generative AI strategy? What's our AI strategy? So there are a lot of motions there, both, excitement, maybe a little bit of FOMO, maybe a little bit of already burnt out from honestly the past, 12 or 14 months when ChatGPT and OpenAI kind of sparked this 2.0 conversation. So let's start with this, maybe Ariel, like as a technology leader, how do you separate all those different emotions, both good and bad, to kind of develop that AI strategy as you move forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is that just because we have a new hammer, not everything is a nail. And we've tried to kick this football before. Every time there's a new data store, where we convince ourselves this is the last data store we'll ever need. So when NoSQL came out, it's like it's NoSQL for throw away your relational database. Don't need that anymore. When graph databases came out, it's the graph. When blockchain came out, it's the blockchain. And it turns out that um, it's never been more true that there's a right tool for the job. And so I'll start with a cautionary tale. Generative AI and the transformer, and Jeffrey Hinton's work on all you need is attention was seminal, but it is a tool. We know of at least one CEO who got so excited about that white paper that he printed it out and gave it to his entire organization, and he said, "Now go and do AI." And they just kind of looked at him, right? So on a practical note, the transformer and GPT democratizes it. It makes it tangible of what this technology can do. Kudos to OpenAI. They've done a great job making that a consumer product that people can touch and feel, the same way that the browser, Mark Andreessen and Mosaic made the internet visible. Before that, the internet was just screen. It looked
Yeah.
like I used the internet when it looked like the Matrix, right? And but on the practical side, most companies that we work with, so Paragon advises mid-market companies, mostly in the $100 million range to $350 million range. We do have some larger businesses. Most of our companies come through our private equity network, and for the most part, they can take advantage of AI and machine learning tools without even touching a large language model.
Yeah, absolutely. Dylan, what's your take? Kind of building on what Ariel's mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're at a very exciting time for our business where we get to help technology leaders turn their IT systems and their IT into a competitive edge and advantage. And so, and the new AI tools and data products that we're working on help to facilitate that.
Absolutely. For either one of you, what we were talking about as we were prepping, we're having to make, as technology leaders, conscious decisions not to use AI or generative AI, or even to have to defend ourselves to those CEOs that are very bullish on the technology or the business side of the house on when it's right to leverage, an LLM, or when it's maybe not. And how are you helping advise clients when they're trying to navigate those decisions, and not only the ration, but the emotion involved in those decisions?
I'll turn the emotion over to Dylan because he's higher EQ than I am, but I'll start with the rational part. Um, the thing about the tool is that um, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
Oh, good.
I had it and then I lost it. Over to you, Dylan. Start with the emotional part, and I'll anchor back in.
Yeah, I think on the emotional side of things, we now get to make our business stakeholders heroes in the organization. And so, for example, we've seen this across the restaurant and retail space and a number of other spaces where the CFO and the CFO, who had historically their roles had been a lot of like looking in the rearview mirror, are now in the driver's seat because of the tools that we're giving them. So pricing, for example, and pricing optimization, restaurants and retailers can now optimize pricing by socioeconomic conditions, by customer, or by product. And they can do that by using a combination of their own data plus external data sources like weather, like zip code data, to really have to really make marginal and incremental impact on business KPIs that move the needle for them. So, and that's all enabled by the IT organization. And again, going back to what I first said, IT can now make the CFO, the COO, the CEO, and the board all heroes for their own business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, say your original question again, so I just anchor it. I kind of lost it there for a second.
We're having to make the technology decisions around hybrid infrastructure technology, but how to build that application or how to leverage that data. And there are some instances when generative AI or large language models aren't appropriate. And we're having to make that discretion as technology leaders, and maybe even defend our rationale for why we're pursuing a non-generative AI based application for this particular task. So I said there's both a lot of rational reasons to it, but
Right.
Sometimes as a technology leader, you might just say, well, I know they want AI, so I'm going to throw some AI at it and make them happy, right?
Yep. Okay, so I figured out what I was going to say, and I got so deep into my rational brain that I compartmentalized it. So whenever something's confusing, I like to build a framework with which to think about it. And the framework that I'd like to introduce here is the difference between an agent and a co-pilot. Okay. And I feel like an agent is a machine learning based data product that has agency, right? It can decide to classify something. It can decide to route something. It can decide to handle something, right? A co-pilot is R2D2 helping you fly an X-wing if you're in Star Wars, right? If you're, and what where we are right now in this cycle is a lot of co-pilot at the executive level. The executive function, I think, is appropriate to keep at the co-pilot. So we can build these data tools, like Dylan said, to make the CFO a hero or the COO a hero for some item of efficiency. But they're the last people hitting the button, pushing, pulling the trigger. And the way that you and I casually use generative AI to maybe reword some of our emails or summarize a document or a meeting transcript. That's very much a co-pilot activity. So I'd encourage leaders to think about and as they facilitate those conversations in the organization, IT always has to serve business and not the other way around. That's a good framework to think about it. Do you want agency or do you want co-pilot? And typically in the crawl, walk, and run, understand the process as a human is probably the crawl. The walk is see if you can get a co-pilot to help you with it.
Yeah.
And then the run would be, which part of these decisions are repetitive enough that an agent can take over.
Yeah. Agreed 100%. As we continue down this kind of line of discussion, it's so interesting. Often the word like replacement comes in, and there's such a loaded word with replacing, either replacing a person or replacing a job, and it almost feels like it takes up the lion's share of the conversation, when exactly to your point, you put two organizations, the exact same tool set, or two individuals with the exact same tool set, and they'll continue to perform vastly differently depending on their lives or their modes of motivation or creativity or emotional intelligence. And I think in parsing through what Benioff was saying last week after he hyped it for 4 days, is that's still the point. While he has to be the showman for his products, replacement almost feels like such a misnomer here that we shouldn't even be asking that question at this point. It's how do we augment, or to your point, use those agencies or co-pilots to make individuals, teams, and organizations smarter, better, faster, right?
Absolutely. Also, it's helpful to understand the pace of change. Cars and horses shared the road for over 50 years. And the other day I saw a strange scene. I saw a UPS driver having to stop for a Waymo car and give it the right of way. And across the street, a Coco delivery robot was having the same right of way with a pedestrian. So, the good news is we're in a transitional period. The bad news is we mustn't hasten this so fast. We should give it some years to breathe. We should figure out, if you're an organization, should figure out what your competitive advantage is and really use the tools to hone that in, so that you don't, there's a reason that brands exist. Brands are shortcuts for thinking about experiences. And everything that people love about your brand, they're still going to love about your brand, even if these tools are in use. So, it's a tool. We're on a continuum, and we continue forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about this. We've been talking a lot of, there's ultimately two functions, the highest level we say about making, employees more productive. And then, the productization about AI, about incorporating it into it and helping, evolve your business model or how it is you make money. I think a lot of consumers or in the B2B world, you talk to them are feeling the AI whitewash. Everything now has a tagline built with AI, and it's very hard to discriminate, where there's reality or not to there, and if that is a meaningful differentiator. So as you instruct your clients in their business models and the products that they're building, how to incorporate it not only to drive meaningful value, but to talk about the value that it's driving, how do you help clients do that? Maybe two-part question.
I'd say that an example is probably helpful here, because there are some folks that are closer to the impact of the comet. An example would be a software business. So one would argue that every business now is a software business, but some businesses actually charge people for accessing software. Let's call it the SaaS industry,
Sure.
or whatnot, right? If you're a software business and you built your platform prior to 3 years ago, which is everyone, right? You have significant technical debt in your product, because these tools have only become available and honed for the last few years. So what do? Do you change the wheels on the bus while it's rolling? It's very difficult, right? And you always want to be rooted in the customer experience and be building things for a customer. We're big believers in the customer jobs to be done methodology.
Yep.
It's this notion that customers hire products in order to do the jobs that they need to do and make their lives easier. So the framework that we have is just this idea of data product. And when we say data product, it is the software phase that comes after SaaS. It is a highly intelligent, customizable tool that's built in your organization with your data in your cloud. And it starts off, we say, test internally, extend externally. So, there might be, let's take the example of a software platform. So, we have worked with a number of organizations. One of them, manages call center software, support center software, right? And it is this decision tree based. If this, then that, press 1 for your bill, press 6 to complain, or, whatever the thing is. And so, what we can do is take those transcripts of conversations, use the understanding of the machine learning models, give that understanding back as almost a coaching tool to the CSR, have them use that as a co-pilot, right? And then figure out, okay, here's the distance that a customer has to do for getting this job to be done. Can we reduce his steps from 6 steps to 4 steps to 2 steps?
Yeah.
And can then an agent, if we get really good at that in a co-pilot plus CSR mode, internally testing, using the data to improve, can we then have an agent handle, some small use case that, that a human doesn't need to do, or some drudgery or some repetitive thing as well. So that's kind of the framework that we used to think about that.
I'd also add that one of the objections that we often get, or one of the things that we hear from executives, is, I'm not ready for AI. And the truth is, you might not be ready for AI, but you certainly have systems that have either product or customer data that are being spit out that can be leveraged to find non-obvious relationships, maybe between the two, or maybe between systems, that can move the needle on some sort of operational or capital KPI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so much on this series, we talk about, like, much of what we talk about, it almost seems obvious, but, it breaks down at some point in the conversation. I love the framework of, test internally and roll out externally, you can see how that conversation might go at the boardroom level or the executive level. And, there might be some pressure. Well, can we save 8-9 figures if we just go right to external? What risks does it present? So when I'm hearing you say, it's just being very methodical about some of the frameworks or decision-making frameworks that you're using inside the organization, and maybe socializing those and getting the buy-in on those frameworks, and then applying those frameworks to the individual situations. Is that fair?
Yeah. One of the hardest board meetings I was in, as a head of IT years ago, was when we had killed ourselves to build this really advanced search engine that ingested all kinds of bioinformatical data. And we had killed ourselves for a year to produce this product, and we had a customer in mind, but we were more focused on the capability than the customer. And I'll never forget the words. I was just, it was earlier in my career. I was just doing this because somebody said, "Hey, go do that." So we did. I wasn't the product owner, but the board member said, you guys have built the perfect answer to a question nobody's asking. And that didn't feel good, after we had
Yeah.
been killing ourselves for
Yeah.
like 100-hour weeks,
Yeah.
So, the board conversations are important for that reason, because they do help set strategy. That's the cautionary tale. If you're not rooted in a customer job to be done, the opportunity is we finally have the opportunity to turn IT from a giant black hole of cash to an ROI machine. And most of the, most executives don't really know where the tens of millions of dollars that IT spend is coming out, and where that, Forrester tells us in their impact reports that you can, within 5 to 7 years, get back some return on investment on a system of record. But here's the good news: with machine learning, you could return up to $3 for every dollar invested in machine learning in a period of 12 months. If you, if you have the right KPIs and you narrowly focus it the right way. So board meetings are about to get fun again. And IT is going to be hopefully a champion of that.
Isn't it so interesting how the hype cycles have the conversation dominated around the technology, but in reality, it forces us back to the business basics and forces us to reevaluate the business model. The old Jim Collins, what I heard is the hedgehog concept. What are you really, really good at? And that may be evolving with AI, but it still forces you to clarify that. Or late, great Clayton Christensen, right? Jobs to be done. Just asking those scrutinous questions and gathering that intelligence and doing that market research that still will never be fully replaced, to then have the confidence that, to your point, Ariel, we've asked the right question, we're solving the right problem, and now we're going to go ahead and do it with that zest and the zeal, right?
Absolutely.
Dylan, we talked about a little bit. You said, I really want, if companies could take one thing away from this conversation, is looking beyond generative AI. This toolkit is evolving so rapidly, and there's so much amazing stuff out there. Can you share an example of a company that was utilizing AI tools other than generative AI?
Yeah, I think one example is companies using predictive analytics, and I'll start with the problem or an example problem, and then I can get into solution. But how often have you been in a retailer like an IKEA, where you go and you're going to get some plates that you saw online and they're not on the shelf? We call this ghost inventory, and it's really like a downstream issue that's caused by a lack of visibility upstream. And so in many manufacturing, especially like linear manufacturing organizations, a delay, not having visibility into your supply chain, and a delay in either raw goods or goods itself can be extremely costly. And so if you have good, clean data and MDM, master data management, then you can layer on some really solid predictive analytics that can help to reduce those costs and ensure that the inventory gets to where it needs to be on time, this is especially critical for seasonal businesses. Think like apparel. So yeah, and in summary, an important place to focus beyond generative AI is predictive analytics and predictive AI.
Yeah. And just to springboard on that, doing a little bit of a technical deep dive on the MDM issue. The two great silos of data in an organization, as Dylan mentioned, are product data and customer data. So companies that are more manufacturing related start dealing with issues with product data first, and companies that are more commerce related, start dealing with customer data issues first. I'll give you two quick examples. In the product data, what ends up happening is that there's a catalog. Maybe it goes to another division. Maybe it goes to the European division, or it goes to the Asian division, and they start taking the SKUs and making variants and creating new products. So it's the exact same item. To Dylan's example, the same plates that are on the shelf, they're now called something else. As a result, you can't see them, even though they're exactly the same thing. Or they're mass customizing something, and when you actually run the machine learning model on it, all the attributes of widget A are 99 to 100% the same as widget B. It's exactly the same thing, but we're only counting widget B. So that's the product MDM issue. On the customer side, we live in an omni-channel world. I have these crazy relationships with brands where I may have started my relationship direct to consumer, but I don't use their D2C mechanism for my subscription. I go to Amazon and reorder, and I might go back to the D2C and reorder. So now they've got me in their customer system or their customer data platform 3 times. How do they know what my customer lifetime value is, right?
Yeah.
So those two silos, product data, customer data, and then the relationship. So when we can start cleaning that up and asking ourselves questions like, for a tier 1 recency, frequency, and monetary customer, or RFM, what are those attributes? Are they non-obvious? And how do we get a tier 2 customer to become a tier 1? What sequence of products do we have to offer them in order to get them to make that jump? So those are some of the benefits that can be unlocked from this data.
Absolutely. We could honestly talk about this all day long. I think we've got time to touch upon 2 more quick topics before the top of the hour. One of the things that we definitely wanted to hit on was this idea of blaming the box. And so as we talked about, gentlemen, as AI gets infused into the lion's share of SaaS tools, say, for instance, a CRM that the head of sales is reviewing daily, to an FP&A tool that the CFO is referencing, to, let's just say, a management strategy SaaS that's designed to help facilitate the development and rollout and monitoring of KPIs, as generative AI is informing all of those decision-making across the C-suite, you're going to start to find the situation where executives find themselves, quote unquote, blaming the box, right? So how do we really, especially in these early innings, as these models are trained and we're learning on the fly, introduce responsible AI or coach executives, right, around the balance of decision-making?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the agent versus co-pilot decision. When there's a really big decision to be made, I'd propose have a human make it, with agency. And in terms of, so I want to separate generative AI from AI, right? Generative AI, on the front end, can understand natural language, speech. It can interact with you to try to figure out what your intent is. And on the back end, it can generate human-like responses. It's a tool. It's like a black box. What happens in the middle is entirely up to your data set. What happens in the middle of that is not necessarily generative AI. It's classification, it's clustering, it's routing, it's probabilistic risk determination, fraud detection, whatever that thing is. And so, it's important to kind of separate those 2 things out. And honestly, at some point, this is where explainability becomes important. So if we get back into the pure generative concept, this is a dark topic, but we don't really, there's no visibility into what exactly ChatGPT or some of these other models have ingested. What do you know about? I don't know. And if you're telling me something, will you give me a source of attribution, and will that attributed source be able to get more sales or more revenue from that attribution? This touches everything from writers in Hollywood to B2B companies and I'm not necessarily bringing this up from an economic standpoint, but from, if you want to look at it, search engines had academic rigor. When Sergey and Larry launched a search engine, they page rank was determined on the concept of scientific classification of articles. There's a title, an abstract, and a body. That's how scientific literature is done, and there was always citations and indices. In this model, we don't know what's been ingested by whom, by what. Some models do a better job, like Bing has some sources that it lists, and you can force GPT to give you sources. But I think better attribution would help close the loop on some of these things upstream, to make the AI a little bit more responsible, a little bit more explainable.
Amazing. All right, I want to get you out of here on this, Ariel and Dylan. This is Turbocharge Tomorrow. We call it for a reason. If you could advise for one technology or strategy or process that our technology would, that our audience is thinking about maybe tomorrow, if they could pull that forward to today, literally this afternoon, and you feel like that could make a big impact for them and their teams and their organization, what would that one thing be?
I'd say you already have the data that you need to have quick wins to incrementally build upon your AI transformation journey.
Awesome. Ariel?
Yeah, likewise. I think that a lot of the magic here is in the plumbing. We classify businesses by stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Stage 1 is systems. Stage 2 is business intelligence. Half the ball game, or if not more, is right there. The good news is, for those technology leaders that are listening, you don't need to pay back all your technical debt. You just need to focus on that data debt that makes your counterparts on the other side of the boardroom table empowered. What are those three metrics that, if magic fairies could come in the middle of the night, would make the CFO's job a little bit easier? So focus on the data debt. Focus on getting just those systems and data upgraded that help drive that, and make data-driven decisions with data.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. That was an awesome conversation. My number one takeaway is continue to focus on the foundations that will enable you and set you up for success for not only this hype cycle, but whatever comes next. Appreciate it. Thank you very much again for listening, and we'll be back shortly with another episode of Turbocharge Tomorrow here around the corner. Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.